So I decided I wanted some still darker color, like a burnt sienna, within this color palette, because I think it works really beautifully. So we have the lighter color than peach and caramel and darker and then still darker, so it would have a lovely gradient of sort of the same color family. So I think I would like the composition to go this way, and originally I grabbed the burnt sienna, but I thought I have another medium and let's explore. The more mediums the better sometimes, especially when it comes to this sort of experimental work. So I'm just going to use maybe 2 drops. Don't need too much of this paint because it has that watercolor effect. Now I can see some of this acrylic has dried already and some of it hasn't. So I'm just going to use my brush and kind of create an overlaid bit of a blob here, like so. So it's sort of like a round, but not a perfect one. And at this minute it doesn't look dark enough, but I'm going to try just play around with it a little bit. It's almost the same color as that one, so I think I need something darker. And the darker color is the burnt umber that I have. So let me just drop that into this color and see what happens. Ooh, now that's actually quite pretty. I like what's happening here, so I'm just going to navigate this color just here, like so. And I think I will leave that because this is such a beautiful effect. It's very, very interesting. So I will leave that to dry, and you can see this was something completely experimental, and you need to experiment with your art supplies. You just you'll find it quite interesting, some of the things you can discover. So that's it. I'm now of course thinking that this area is too big and too perfect and I'd like to mess it up, but that's what these art supplies are for. So your Neocolors, your pencils, your acrylic markers, all of that will come in handy to break down certain elements and add to it. So that's all that I'm going to do for now. And literally, if you're still tempted to start messing about with it, usually that's when I find I overwork my pieces or my pages, even though these are not supposed to be so carefully designed, but I just like them to be perfect sometimes still. So to walk away from that will of trying to perfect it, it's best to just leave it to rest and come back to it. A good little tip that I could share with you, if you are very tempted of still going back to it, by all means you can do that. But for me, what I try to do to distract myself from trying to, add and add and add, and then in the end just kind of overwork the entire thing, I tend to do a few more swatches if I can on the page next to it. So what I do is, if I like this color palette here, I'm just as a reminder going to swatch out these colors kind of in a strip, and maybe even write down the names for them if I don't want to write anything on here, for instance. So that's what I would do. And let's see, this should be the next one. I'm just going to squeeze them out. Okay, so let's swatch them out first. And it's fine if they, touch each other and the colors blend a little bit. Again, this is just, a time and space to at least try not to take things too seriously. In fact, I'll just encourage that bit of blending here. See if I like something. I'll try to add a bit more of this color here. Okay, and then we added these two, which actually work quite well. So I'm just going to swatch them one next to the other. So, here we go. That's a nice way to keep things here. And then of course, if you wanted to add some more marks, then you can just scribble them, find space around the page if you wanted to. Otherwise, just leave it as it is. Okay, and that kind of distracted me from going into this area and try and do more to it. So I think what I could do is, if I'm still not happy after, then I can layer over the dry mediums rather than going into the wet and just messing everything up. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so things are drying. Now I found that once this color has dried, this blue, light blue permanent, is that it kind of went slightly darker than what I remember it out of the tube. Let's see if that's the case. So it looks a touch lighter before it dries. So what I'm going to do is right here next to it, because again, this is not about being precious, this is about experimenting and finding things. What I'm going to do is just add a bit of that blue again. And this time I'm going to add some white. I'm going to actually use my brush to get some white, and I'm going to mix it in on the paper and see what sort of a color I get, whether I like this color more. So I think, as you can see here, it's a much more pastel blue, and I might be more comfortable with that color. I assume once it will be drying, it will be getting a touch darker still, so we can use this color. So I'm just going to swatch it here. And I wonder the difference between that color and also adding a bit of buff titanium, whether that will create slightly more of a greener or slightly more sort of warmer tone, because obviously buff titanium is warmer. So for that, I'm just going to find a little dish I can use for mixing, and just let's see the different tone. This is the time for doing all of that. So when you're in a rush and you're trying to create a finished piece, you will not be keen to be experimenting, I would assume, or at least I am not. So in that case, what's the better time than this to experiment? Yes, it's more of a warmer tone and it's actually quite pretty. Just going to mix it up a bit proper. So it almost has like a mint color to it. So this is buff titanium versus white. So that's really pretty actually. So I might use that as a bit of a blob somewhere here. Why not? So I quite like the texture from the acrylic coming through onto here. Alright, so I'm going to make a little memo about these colors. Okay, so at this point everything is, I think mostly everything is dry. So I would go over with something like neon colors, because I might still want to use some water. And the last point that I like to do to finish it is usually like a gel pen or some sort of acrylic paint pen for doodling, or those Malata ones. That's sort of the finishing touches, which we're not going to go into now. But yeah, for now I have the opportunity to use Neocolor I or Neocolor II, which is the water soluble. So let me separate them and I will see what I can do. So I have some blues here, and I think I'm going to use the non-water soluble. I want to bring this blue area just a little bit here, just with some scribble. And I just sort of try to move my wrist in a funny way, just to kind of detach from the perfection. I don't want this to be about perfect or whatever, just I want it to be a little bit of a color repetition right here in the corner and just sort of phase out. And then I just can overlay a couple of colors here, like so, just again repeating a little cluster of colors that we already used, and just possibly just doodle a little bit. Layering this over the other mediums like so. And then we have some gold, and I'm not sure, but I'm just going to blend that in as well a little. So I have a bit of a cluster repetition of the colors, and I might want to use some watercolor just to, because they're water soluble, they create this ever so slight watercolory effect, which I really find quite neat. And going over it onto the Neocolor I, which will stay as it was because it's not water soluble, makes it still come through. So that's why it is quite actually useful to have Neocolor I and Neocolor II. And at that point, I think, I'm not sure if I want to add a bit of this color elsewhere here. So Neocolors are great for when you want to go over with them because they're quite opaque and you want to, for instance, lift an area that's quite dark. So if this one is too dark and I want to knock it back a little bit, I could do that with the Neocolor. I find that Neocolor II layer beautifully over acrylic ink and gouache paints. Sometimes when you layer them over acrylic paints, they don't do as well. But you just have to experiment a little bit, really. So here I would want to add a bit of water and just to pull it out onto the paper here. And that looks quite interesting. It doesn't look very nice when you use water over other mediums like acrylic paint, so you need to pull it out onto the paper. Although, you know, when I say nice, it's really subjective how you think and feel about certain things in art, so that's just and this one is still not fully dry, so this is probably why it wasn't layering really well over it. So I'm quite happy with this area. I think I don't need to do much more to it, to be honest, but there's something that needs to be done here, and I will see if I can bring this color a bit more onto this side, maybe with a larger scribbling, just sort of connect it and see what happens. Just kind of melting the Neocolor onto it. And that already, again, knocked back about half of it, so I'm quite happy with that. So I'll leave this area for a bit of doodling, I think, just to maybe connect the blue color going onto here as well. That could be a nice thing to do. Yeah, I mean, we're getting there. It's pretty much done now. And just thinking maybe I'll just introduce a touch of this darker color into here as well. So that was the English red. Again, just a bit of water. Depends how strong you want things to be. You can go into the wet and it will be quite strong. Or you can use water. Okay, so I need to let this dry, and I think after that I'm pretty much going to go into the doodling and that will be done. Okay, so things are still drying over here, but I'm quite ready to finish it. And the thing I forgot to say is that every time I have taken a break, treat that as a separate session. So I don't usually do them like that. That's the whole point. I don't sit down and sort of finish and do all the stages in one go. I'm just filming it for you to show you, you know, in one video basically, so that I don't need to film for a few weeks and then edit it into one. But that's how I do them. First I start with the swatches, then another time, it could be within the same day, maybe morning and evening, or next day, or a couple of days later, or even weeks later. I could go back and still be adding things where I feel we need to add. Before I move on to the final stage, I was going to say that if you remember when I did this little blob here, it looked, when it was wet, it looked exactly like that. So the Designer Gouache Gold Ochre and the System 3 Burnt Sienna, but as it dried, it actually dried to this beautiful color. So there was no need for me to use the burnt umber to darken it still. So I'll bring it here in for you. So I could have just left it with that. That's the other thing you learn as you go. that sometimes colors next to each other look completely the same when they're wet, but they do develop. However, having said that, the burnt umber did some beautiful effects within the burnt siennas, so I'm quite glad that I experimented with that. So I think that is about everything I wanted to share. Now let's go on to the final stages. Again, this would be another session at whichever point. So I'm going to go with my Jelly Roll 10. This is a great doodling pen. And what I find is that there are too many similar shapes. They're a bit too perfect. So shapes like this I prefer, because they are not perfect and I just love the look of them. So I want to go away from perfection and I want to have these sort of organic kind of blobs and shapes. This is a little bit too perfect for me. So what I'm going to try and do is to break it up a little bit by just starting to doodle, and I'm just going to doodle these kind of round or oval shapes and try to fill up the entire circle with it. It's very, very relaxing and therapeutic to do. The larger they are, the faster you will be finished. So if you really wanted to embark upon a relaxing session, make them quite small. There's something about repetitive patterns that just gets your brain switched off from everything else. So you will see in the end that there is no longer just a circle there, because now we have loads of little different shapes, and that's where the eye will be focusing when you look at it, rather than that there is a perfect round underneath, holding all of them together. So there you go. That's the doodling done. Now here we have two similar colors, two similar shapes, and again I would like to do something, and I think I'd like to bring this darker color into here by doing some sort of doodling. And I could try to doodle with this pen. Actually, I saw someone recently sharpening this. Let's see if I can, no, I don't know how they sharpen that. They must have a special sharpener for them. But it would be so good to have a thinner point on these. So I found a way to get these to a finer point. So from there I went to here. Basically I use one of those nice and affordable sharpeners which has a wider end, and you do get a lot of wastage, but if you wanted to, if these are water soluble, you could save them and you could sort of add some water and turn them into more kind of watercolor effects. So now that I have a sharper point and I can do a bit more detailed, I'm going to go into here and just bring this kind of burnt sienna color into here. So I'm also going to add it onto this color because it's redder. This is the, what was it again? English red, so it's redder than the burnt sienna underneath, and it's going to layer quite nice. In fact, I'm going to take it over here everywhere like so, and then just spread it out. So just focus it where you want the focus of it to be, a bit more dense, and then just spread them out. So something like that. then finally I would go with my Molotov and just do loads of little dots. Just around where this shape starts here. Again, quite dense to begin with. And then just spread them out a little bit. So something like that. So we brought this blue color from over here, we brought it into here and there. So we have a visual triangle that hits like that, and then hopefully our eye will sort of bring the whole composition together. Now, at this point, I would call it a day and walk away from it, and I'm sure a couple of days later, if I wanted to add something maybe here or there, I could still do that. But again, I don't want it to be overworked. This is about learning things and layering and finding, like I said, lovely color palettes that you're working on. This is a way of swatching, but more in a creative way without needing to finish a painting. So that's it. I hope you found it useful. Remember that this is not to be done in one sitting, one session, although if you wanted to, you could, but this is designed to squeeze in, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there into your most busy schedule and still have some lovely art produced, or some creative time. And you could, if you really wanted and enjoyed something like that, you could create this sort of a similar piece on a larger piece of paper and frame it, and that would be a finished artwork. So from that you could maybe learn something you didn't like, something you could take away from this, something you did like, something you would want to take further next time or explore more next time. So same thing happened here somewhere. Let me see. Oh yes, so in this corner right here, I actually tried a few things, and I do like how this looks, but I don't like it together with that because I had something else going on here. I had some lovely colors which were blending into this beautiful burnt sienna, and since I added this element, although I enjoy it, it kind of puts a gap between this and that, and it takes away from it. So I would, for instance, create this somewhere else sometime and learn from it, and I would also separately from that also repeat this area and this area again together. So you can use these creative times as your learning space, and that's exactly what this is about. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.